Software distribution has always been kind of weird in the FOSS world. Really, the concept of a Linux distribution, a Linux distro, is kind of weird unto itself. In most other times, in most other places, the distributor and the developer were either the exact same people, everything's being done in-house, or very strongly tied together. You're a developer, and then you send it to the publisher, and the publisher gets it out into the world. But for most of FOSS history, this is just not the way it's worked. Yes, there is corporate software and things are done in corporate ways there, but for most other things, for pretty much every volunteer project, you make the software, you put the code out there, maybe you make a binary, maybe you make a package or two. Nowadays, you'll often see a Flatpak, an app image, maybe a snap, maybe an AUR package, maybe a Nix package, but when it comes to the Linux distros, the operating systems that people are running, the Fedora packaging, the Debian packaging, the OpenSUSE packaging, the Arch packaging, the Gentoo packaging, all of this other packaging, and even done multiple times in a singular family line, are done by entirely different people with oftentimes entirely different motivations and expectations from what the software should be doing and how it should be handled. And this can lead to tensions when those expectations, when those motivations come to clash. For instance, is this case that happened very recently. Remove/replace links pointing to GNOME Calendar and update branding. This was opened quite a while ago, but everything was, I'm not going to say resolved, but ended about a week to 2 weeks ago, depending on when this was uploaded. Basically what happened here is GNOME Calendar developers requested the removal of links to the project being GNOME Calendar. They had links in the About section and eventually said, remove the GNOME Calendar branding altogether, rename it, do whatever you need to do, but this thing you're shipping is not GNOME Calendar. The reasoning here is Mint, as is often the case with anything based on Ubuntu or Debian, especially Ubuntu LTS, these projects tend to ship really out-of-date software. Mint's counter-argument was, why are you bothering us? We're just shipping what Ubuntu LTS provides, go bug them, they're the ones who are actually packaging the software. GNOME was here specifically, though, because a lot of the reports against these really old versions were coming from Linux Mint users, not Ubuntu LTS, not Debian users, so they felt that Mint was the right place to go here. At the end, things pretty much went nowhere, things got a little bit heated, and ultimately Clem, the guy from Mint here, basically wanted nothing to do with it, and pretty much just said, we can ship whatever version we want. If you don't like that, change the license. Then we have this situation from the KDE bug tracker. Bluetooth won't connect to any devices, won't scan new install. This is from about 11-ish days ago, but was seen and reported against 6.3.6. This is a really old version of Plasma. It is absolutely not being supported by the project. This reporter was pretty much just demanding, hey, this is KDE software, fix the KDE software, why is the software broken? The KDE developers pretty much just said, we're not going to deal with your attitude, stop trying to demand like a leader of KDE that doesn't really exist. Also, you're running a really out-of-date version. Take this to Debian. This is Debian's problem because they're shipping a version which is really out of date, and this bug has probably already been fixed in a modern version. Not to just pick on the Debian line, we also have two very similar situations in Fedora land. Firstly is with Bottles, then with OBS. Both of these, I believe I made videos on, but I don't fully remember. From Bottles, take down unofficial outdated packages. This is made against the Bottles repo, but was about what Fedora was doing. For OBS, broken OBS Studio Flatpak presented as official package, so Bottles had an issue with the Fedora RPM, and OBS with the Fedora Flatpak. In the Flatpak case, I do think this was probably quite a bit worse, because originally the way that Fedora was handling Flatpaks is Fedora Flatpak was effectively masking FlatHub, where if you had it enabled, it wasn't really obvious where the Flatpak was coming from. You'd probably expect FlatHub because that's where Flatpaks normally come from, But if it was in Fedora Flatpak, it would come from Fedora Flatpak. This led to users downloading the Flatpak, getting a version which was inferior, had missing features, and was not supported by the OBS team. They'd go report a problem to OBS because they thought they were running the official package, and they weren't, and this led to a bunch of wasted time being made. For bottles, it was a little bit different because no one expects the RPM in the repos to be the official package, but also the RPM was being installed by users, and if there is a package available, users expect that package to work, but the RPM at the time was pretty broken. It was not supported by the bottles team whatsoever. People tried to use it, it would just crash, and gave a really bad experience for what bottles was actually like. This obviously isn't every single time there's been an issue between upstream and downstream, but it should be enough to illustrate my point. Upstream and downstream often have very different expectations for what the package should look like, how it should be packaged, the acceptable level of packaging, the way that bugs should be handled, who should be dealing with these issues, and this creates a lot of problems. I'm not saying it's a problem that needs to go away. I'm not saying I want to get rid of this upstream and downstream packaging, but it is something where if you're engaging in it, you do need to keep in mind that you're probably approaching this from a very different perspective. And this does raise a very important discussion question. What is the role of your upstream and your downstream? Should there be any overlap whatsoever? Should downstreams even really exist? Or should upstream just be where all the packaging is being done, and then if downstreams do exist, they're basically just a collection of the upstream work? Frankly, I don't have a good answer. In the past, I was a lot more set in one way or the other. I thought a lot more of the work should have been done in upstream, but speaking to more downstream developers, I realized both sides here have some pretty good arguments about the way things should be done. Downstreams would argue that they have packaging expertise. Let's say you're a Fedora packager. You have deep understanding of how to make RPMs, how the Fedora infrastructure works, how to do that packaging, and not just Fedora. The same could be said about OpenSUSE, Arch Linux, Gentoo, Ubuntu, anywhere else. The packages for that distro, they understand how their packaging system works. They understand the intricacies, they understand the limits, they understand things they can do to work around problems. They hopefully understand what the users of their distro actually want, and they understand how they want things to be packaged. Let's say, for example, you're on a Debian. If you're on Debian because you don't like to update things. You want to say it's because stable, whatever. It's because you don't like to install updates. Same with Ubuntu LTS. You don't want things to change. For a server, it's a bit different, but if you're running it on the desktop, you just don't really want updates. But if you're on Arch because you specifically want things to be pretty much rolling as fast as possible. A little bit delayed in some cases, but you want to have those updates pretty much as fast as you can get them. And you can't really have a single packaging solution that accommodates both of those users. And whilst really not being supported by upstream, sometimes downstream distros want to cherry pick a patch that makes sense for their users. Bring in a feature before it is entirely ready, bring in a patch that addresses a problem specifically on their distro, make some additional changes that really only make sense in that environment. Again, these are things that only the downstream knows how to do and knows that they need to be done. Any upstream developer, yeah, they're going to have their distro they use, but they're focused on their software, they're focused on their system, they aren't going to have a deep understanding of the entire landscape of distros. Whilst downstream might understand the packaging, upstream would argue they have the deepest understanding of the software, because they're the ones who built it. They understand the feature set. They understand if there is a bug, how to iron out some of those problems, and how to bring the best experience for people that want to use the software. Whilst they might not have the packaging knowledge for every single distro out there, with the wide support of Flatpak, but also AppImage and Snap, that complexity has been greatly reduced, and you can just learn maybe one or two systems and pretty much just have a package that's going to work consistently across every single distro. You don't have to worry about different versions on different distros, you don't have to worry about supporting all of these different systems. You can just say, the one that we support is the Flatpak, is the app image, is the snap. And this is the one where if you have a bug, replicate the bug in that, and then we'll identify it as a real bug. This makes the job of maintaining the software considerably easier because you don't have to go and track down these weird phantom bugs that don't exist in your packaging solution. They only exist on Ubuntu on 2404 with this and that installed. It just doesn't become a problem then. But somebody would have to deal with the bugs, and this is one of the places where Upstream and Downstream tend to completely agree. If you've installed the official package, let's say the OBS Flatpak, where should you go for any of your bugs? For an official package, bottles, or anything else out there, I think it is totally fine to go directly to the developers of the project, their issue tracker, their bug tracker, whatever they're using to track bugs, report the bug there. If you are doing anything else, let's say you have the Arch Linux package for OBS, or I was going to say Ubuntu, but I believe the Ubuntu package is actually official, or the Fedora package for OBS, or something else out there, in that case, it is generally recommended to first go to your distro if they have a bug tracking solution. Report the bug there, say, hey, I'm running this version, I have this problem, and if it is not a bug on the distro, then they can direct you up to Upstream and say, hey, go report the bug there. That seems to be an actual problem with the software, not with our packaging solution, not with any of the changes we made. Downstreams may also argue about cases like XZ-utils. What played a large part in stopping that being a major backdoor that would have been really, really damaging is that there wasn't just a single package that everybody installed that everybody updated to. Instead, distros were all doing their own thing, and many of them hadn't even shipped the package. Maybe it was in testing in some cases, but in a lot of cases, they hadn't even started doing testing yet, and pretty much no users actually downloaded the affected version. But if the developer could just push out an update and then say, hey, new update's available, go download the update, that could be a much more serious problem. In some cases, not serious, just really annoying. For example, Steam has its own internal updater, and there have been cases in the past where a bad update was made, and then some core functionality of Steam just stopped working. Now, Valve usually on that pretty quickly and pushed out a new update relatively fast, but you're going to install that update, and you're going to have a broken Steam client. And this can happen with any software out there. Obviously, it can still happen if a distro ships a bad package. But if a single distro ships a bad package, it affects the distro users. It doesn't affect every single user. Upstreams may also argue that 99% of the time, 99.99, so on and so forth % of the time, that's not what's happening. Most projects are not malicious, most projects have not been taken over, most projects are not shipping out bad updates, so most of the time, having Upstream doing the packaging isn't a negative, and in many ways for the Upstream is a positive for them. It's a consistent environment for versions, so that makes it easier to know which version they should be supporting. It's a consistent environment the software is running in, and a whole bunch of things that makes Upstream's life considerably easier. One thing I want to touch on is LTS distros, because I think they're a very interesting concept unto themselves. In the corporate space, they kind of make sense. You're paying for support, they have a place, and, you understand what you're getting in that relationship. But when we're looking at the consumer space, I don't really think the term has that much of a meaning. So Pop! OS is a really good example of a strange use of their website's down. Thank you. Lovely. Okay, apparently it's fine. Anyway, what I was saying, strange use of the term LTS. So we have Pop! OS 2404 LTS. And clearly, as we saw from the LTT series, this usage of the term LTS leads to a bit of confusion around what you're going to get from this. LTS to a lot of people implies stability. It stands for long-term support, but in their mind it is stable. It's getting updates, but it's not necessarily feature updates. It's a solid baseline to build on, and you can expect that this has been well tested and everything works really well. And when you look at something like an Ubuntu LTS, you know, the results you see are very, very different. Ubuntu LTS cherry picks patches, they backport stuff for years, and yes, PopOS does do some of the same, and Ubuntu's still not perfect in this case. There's still a lot of parts of Ubuntu where if you're not paying money, you are not going to have support for those systems. But at the same time with PopOS, parts of the system are rolling, so it's this thing that is called LTS, and people expect LTS to mean stability, but it's running this cutting-edge desktop now. It has various other components which are rolling and getting updates at a relatively frequent pace, resulting in this project which is supported for a long term, but is not the kind of LTS you would expect from other things also called LTS. I'm not saying the PopOS model is bad or an LTS distro can't have certain things that roll, but as you can see what I've been saying throughout this entire video, there is this mismatch of expectations between what is stated, what is expected, and what you actually get at the end. And that kind of tension creates problems in all kinds of areas. Again, whether it be upstream and downstream, whether it be a user using a system and then not getting what they thought they would get, and then blaming the system when what's actually happening is they didn't understand or the system didn't communicate what it's trying to be. But overall, what are your thoughts? What do you think is the role of upstream and downstream? How much overlap do you think there should be between the two? And especially if you're either developing an application or you're a packager on a system, I would love to know your thoughts. So, if you liked the video, go like the video. If you really like the video and you want to become one of, go subscribe as well. I always forget to do that. If you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, subscribe to the Pay, linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and give it up.
Something like this.